Poor, innocent Lucifer is tormented by his so-called friends, and now they're forcing him to bring them alcohol. Suddenly, he bolts from his seat and runs out of the classroom. The teachers try to stop him, but he ignores them. He looks terrified, as if something alarming just came to his mind. Rushing home, he takes a bag from the fridge, anxiously checks the time, and leaves in a hurry. Paul, a friend of Lucifer's father, bought his late wife's dream hotel. But tragedy struck when a young guest committed an unthinkable act. She murdered a child. Years have passed, yet the darkness lingers. And today, Paul's daughter is walking into it. Suddenly, he hears a car horn outside. Thinking his daughter has arrived, he steps outside with a smile, only for his joy to vanish. It's not his daughter. It's Susie, the very woman whose blood-soaked memories Paul had desperately tried to bury. The narrative then shifts to a flashback of when Paul purchased the vacation rental. At that time, Paul's wife was in the final stages of cancer, with only 3 months left to live. Desperate to buy more time with her, Paul would have sold everything. But fate had other plans. This vacation home was all he could give her. Back in the present, seeing Susie again reopens the dark chapter of Paul's past. She asks for a room, but Paul refuses, saying his daughter and other guests are arriving. Sensing his hesitation, Susie understands that Paul doesn't want her there. Just as Susie is about to leave, Paul's daughter, Iris, arrives. Hearing that her father turned away a guest because of her, Iris insists Susie should stay. She mentions that she and her friend will only need the room for one night, and it'll be available afterward. Iris has no idea that her act of kindness is about to plunge Paul into even deeper trouble. Thanks to Iris, Susie is allowed to stay. That night, after dinner, everyone retires to bed, but Paul is plagued by disturbing dreams about Susie. Her return signals more danger ahead because the next day, Iris will leave. This is Lucifer's mother, Lee. Lee works at a restaurant, but she's on the brink of being fired because of her growing drinking problem, which has led to several mistakes. One day, after secretly drinking, Lee makes another error, and when the restaurant owner scolds her, Lee lashes out, letting out all her pent-up frustration about the motel's failure. Within moments, Lee is fired. Now, with no income and no options, Harry and Lee decide to sell the motel. They hope and pray for a good deal. That same night, after dinner, Harry goes out to meet Jordan, while Lee continues working. But Lucifer is still awake. Taking advantage of the moment, Lucifer sneaks a few bottles of his mother's alcohol, packs them in a bag, and heads out to meet some boys. These boys are his school friends, but shockingly, they've asked Lucifer to bring them alcohol and cigarettes. Lucifer goes to the group of boys and hands them the entire bag. Along with the alcohol and cigarettes, something else had accidentally slipped into the bag. As the boys fool around, they start consuming everything. Shortly afterward, Lucifer's mother realizes he's not home and starts searching for him. She eventually reaches the spot where Lucifer had gone, but by then, chaos had already erupted. While they were playing, one of the boys fainted and had to be rushed to the hospital. Lee is unaware of what's happening, but when she later finds out the truth, it feels like the ground beneath her feet has disappeared. Back home, Harry is furious and tries to punish Lucifer, but Lee intervenes, knowing Harry doesn't yet understand the full story. It turns out Lucifer's friends had been pressuring him to bring alcohol and cigarettes every day, threatening to beat him up or burn down his father's motel if he refused. That night, when Lucifer took the alcohol and cigarettes, some sleeping pills had accidentally ended up in his bag. The boys, playing a risky game, decided to take the pills, waiting to see who would fall asleep first. Once Harry hears the whole story, he calms down, but the problem isn't solved. The father of the boy who fainted files a complaint at the school. Harry goes to the school as well, but in a moment of anger, he ends up attacking the boy's father, knowing Lucifer had been blackmailed. The fight is eventually broken up, and the issue is settled. The following day, some customers visit Jordan's gallery, but they start bad-mouthing the motel. Angry, Jordan refuses to sell them anything. When they don't get what they want, they begin arguing with him. Jordan, furious, curses at them and throws them out of the shop. A scuffle nearly breaks out, but Officer Kim, passing by, steps in to calm everyone down. While this was happening, a news reporter shows up, intending to write a story about the anniversary of Harry's motel. First, Kim sends the angry customers away, and then Jordan, still frustrated, speaks with the reporter. The reporter doesn't ask Jordan anything about the motel, sensing his anger, but Kim is curious. The reporter explains that Carl, the infamous killer, has made the motel notorious, and ever since the murder there, the motel has gained a dark sort of fame. The reporter wants to interview Harry, thinking that sharing his tragic story might rekindle interest in the motel, helping Harry restart his business. Jordan, sitting quietly nearby, listens closely. He likes the idea, believing that it might help Harry, who has been deeply troubled. Jordan takes the reporter to Harry's house and convinces Harry to give the interview. With everything agreed upon, Kim heads back to the police station. Things seem to be going well, but shortly after, Kim receives an urgent call from Harry's house. She rushes to her car and drives over quickly. The story then returns to the present. Susie has made noodles, and Paul sits down with her to eat. Realizing this might be his best chance to get answers, Paul directly asks, "Why did you come back?" Susie doesn't give a straight answer, instead jokingly saying, "I missed you." After they finish eating, Paul leaves, but later that night, he has another nightmare. In the dream, his hands are covered in blood. Startled, he wakes up and goes to check on Susie, but she's nowhere to be found. Panicked, Paul runs to the police station. As he arrives, his nose suddenly starts bleeding, likely from the stress. He reaches into his pocket for a handkerchief but pulls out a photograph instead. Seeing it terrifies him even more. It's a picture of his family, but his daughter's face is circled in red. This means Susie's next target is Iris. Paul doesn't tell anyone at the station about the photo. He wipes his nose with a tissue and quietly leaves. As Paul exits, Officer Kim notices him and once again grows suspicious. The story then flashes back to the past. When Officer Kim arrives at Harry's house, she finds Lee unconscious, with Harry sitting silently beside her in a daze. Kim quickly checks on Lee and realizes she isn't breathing. She immediately begins chest compressions, trying to revive her, but it seems Lee is already dead. Whether she is truly gone or not will be revealed in the next episode. It takes us to the time when Harry was about to buy the motel. That day, both Harry and his wife were filled with joy, as running the motel and building a reputation had always been Harry's dream. Sadly, that dream never became a reality. The day Officer Kim went to Harry's house, she found Lee dead. Lee had committed suicide. Before taking her own life, she left a note explaining that she couldn't bear the memories of the young girls Carl, the killer, had murdered. The nightmares of those girls haunted her daily, and she could no longer live with that torment. This led her to take her own life. With Lee gone, Harry sank even deeper into loneliness. His motel had already been closed, and now, with the grief of Lee's death, he was completely shattered. After speaking with Kim, Harry visits Carl in prison. He confronts him, asking, "What did I ever do to you? Why did you ruin my life?" But Carl shows no remorse, replying, "You were the one who invited me to the motel that day, so this is all your fault." After the encounter, Harry leaves and tries to give Kim some money as a token of thanks. Kim refuses multiple times, but Harry forces the money into her hand, thanks her, and walks away. Before leaving, Harry tells Kim, "Don't ever become a frog in your life, because people only throw stones at it and leave." And the frog is left wondering, "Why me? What did I do wrong? Does the person throwing stones have no one else in the world to aim at?" With that, Harry departs. The story then jumps back to the present. Paul, worried about his daughter, goes to the lab to check on her. Relieved to see Iris safe, he chats with her briefly, and then heads to the hospital to visit Paxton. Before he leaves, Iris gives him a gift for Paxton. As Paul prepares to leave, he notices Susie standing in the distance. Nervous, Paul starts following her, but as he chases after her, he stumbles and falls, losing sight of Susie. Iris, unaware of Paul's turmoil, is left puzzled by his strange behavior. The story shifts again to the past. After meeting Harry, Kim goes to speak with her senior officer. She hands him the money Harry gave her and explains the situation. Her senior, who knows Kim well, reminds her of her strengths. Kim is not driven by a desire to help people, but by her passion for catching criminals. In the department, she's like a hunter. Once she has her sights set on a criminal, it's nearly impossible for them to escape. Back in the present, Paul visits Paxton at the hospital. Paxton's leg has been put in a cast, and the two sit down for a drink and chat. Paul had intended to tell Paxton everything about Susie, but before he can reveal the truth, he spots Susie's shadow in the distance. Fearful, Paul decides not to tell Paxton the full story. Instead, he only mentions that the girl who stayed at his rental last year, Susie, left something important behind, and he's been trying to return it to her. As Paul reflects on the situation, he realizes that Susie never used her real name when she booked the rental. It was under her son's name. It was only after she left that he found Iris's picture among her belongings. With everything starting to make sense, Paul heads home. Later, when Susie is outside, Paul tries to secretly access her laptop, but it's password protected. He takes the laptop to a shop where the technician tells him that breaking the password would erase all the data. Frustrated and confused, Paul returns home, unsure of how to deal with the constant trouble Susie is causing him. Susie's behavior is unpredictable and unsettling. No one could guess what she was thinking or what her next move might be. One day, Susie visits a laundromat in Paul's neighborhood. She asks the owner to take photos of the shop, saying she wants to use the same colors in a painting. Her actions are strange, but murder was something far beyond ordinary. Susie knew Paul had taken her laptop, yet she didn't try to stop him. When Paul returns, Susie calmly asks for her laptop back, telling him, "If there's something you want to know, just ask me." Paul remains silent. That evening, he has dinner with Susie, using the opportunity to ask her the questions that have been tormenting him. But Susie, always one step ahead, manages to turn the tables on him. She tells Paul, "When I stayed here with my son last year, you only had one piece of evidence, some footage. If you go to the police, you'll be in trouble too. You've hidden that evidence for a year and even tried to erase it to help me." After hearing Susie's words, Paul immediately stands up and storms out. Part of him starts to believe she might be right, but Paul isn't naive. Unbeknownst to Susie, he had secretly recorded their entire conversation. The next morning, Paul takes the recording and heads straight for the police station. However, when Susie wakes up, she spots an empty recorder box in Paul's room, the one he purchased the previous day. Realizing he recorded their conversation, Susie quickly jumps into her car and speeds toward the police station. Meanwhile, Paul arrives at the station, but before he can exit his car, Susie crashes into him. The impact is severe, and blood gushes from Paul's head as he starts to lose consciousness. This is where the fourth episode ends.